Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into a side of academia we don't often talk about. The mental health of the people who power it, the students, the researchers, pushing the boundaries of knowledge. You sent over some research on this, and we're going to uncover what's really going on beyond the statistics.
Yeah, it's definitely a side of academia that deserves a lot more attention. And we'll be digging into the pressures faced by academics, that unspoken stigma surrounding mental health in that environment, and how all of that impacts their lives and careers.
Let's unpack this, shall we? I've got Lynette Pretorius's work, specifically her paper, Ethnography of M, to guide us. Get ready, because this deep dive might just shift how you see higher education.
What's striking is we often romanticize academia as this pure haven of intellectual exploration, which it is, but it comes with a whole other set of pressures most people don't realize.
Oh, absolutely. And those pressures have serious consequences. Just to set the scene, this research comes out of Australia. Now, nearly 44% of Australians experience a mental health issue in their lifetime, with around 21% dealing with it in any given year. We're talking conditions like anxiety and mood disorders, which are unfortunately incredibly common.
Right. And those stats alone are significant. But here's where it gets really eye-opening. These rates are even higher within academia. Pretorius even goes as far as calling it an academic mental health crisis.
And she's not exaggerating. One study she cites found PhD students were 6 times more likely to struggle with depression and anxiety than the general public. 6 times. That's a huge red flag that something's seriously wrong.
Exactly. This isn't about individual weakness or a few people struggling to cope. There are built-in pressures of the academic system itself that contribute to this crisis. The constant need to publish, the cutthroat competition for funding, the isolating nature of PhD research, and the uncertainty of academic job security. It all takes a toll.
It's like a pressure cooker with the heat turned way up. But what makes Pretorius' research so powerful is that she doesn't just throw stats at us. She brings in the human element. She shares the story of M, a PhD student navigating this exact landscape.
And M's story, while personal, is sadly not unique. She began her PhD journey driven by this incredible passion to help marginalized children. Such a stark contrast, the struggles she later faced.
You're telling me she went from this driven, passionate student to having full-blown panic attacks, feeling completely overwhelmed, describing it like driving a tiny boat on a fierce ocean. Her words. That image just stays with you.
It's incredibly powerful. And tragically, M's experience is pretty much par for the course for many PhD students. It's this feeling of constantly being overwhelmed with very little support to help them navigate these immense pressures. And what's important to understand is that M's experience, measured by something called the General Health Questionnaire, or GHQ-12, wasn't an outlier. In fact, M's GHQ-12 score, which measures mental well-being, mirrored the trends Pretorius observed in her wider study.
So we're not talking about isolated incidents here. This is a widespread issue in academia. But here's the thing, even with support services available on most campuses, many students, including M, are really hesitant to seek help.
And the reasons for that are complex, but stigma plays a huge role. There's this deep fear of judgment, not only from fellow students, but also from potential employers down the line.
Right. It's like this unspoken expectation to appear strong and capable, even when you're barely keeping your head above water.
Precisely. And in M's case, it went even deeper. Cultural factors and her religious beliefs added another layer of complexity. She felt ashamed, constantly worried about judgment from her community, and even questioned whether her faith was being tested. It just goes to show how these different layers of stigma can prevent people from accessing the support they desperately need.
It's so disheartening that this stigma exists because it keeps people from getting the help they need. But M's story takes a really powerful turn when she has this realization, and I'm going to quote her directly here, "If I'm dead, I can't finish my PhD."
It seems almost absurdly simple when you put it like that, but it's such a profound moment of clarity for her. The stark realization in the middle of all that pressure.
Right, like suddenly the degree itself didn't matter as much as her own well-being. It really makes you realize how all-consuming it had become for her.
Yeah. It's a common experience in academia, unfortunately. But this is where M's story transitions from struggle to hope. She makes a conscious decision to start prioritizing her self-care. And in doing so, she rediscovers that initial spark, that passion for the research itself. It became less about the end goal of the PhD and more about the journey of discovery.
That's so inspiring. And it leads us to what Pretorius talks about, building resilience. But here's what I appreciate. She doesn't frame it as this superhuman effort to just tough it out.
Exactly. It's not about gritting your teeth and pushing through the pain. It's about building sustainable strategies for mental well-being. Pretorius talks about cultivating what she calls psychological capital, and she breaks it down with this really handy acronym, HERO.
Okay, I love a good acronym. Tell me more about this hero.
So HERO stands for hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And these aren't just feel-good buzzwords. Pretorius argues that they're actually skills and perspectives that we can develop and strengthen over time.
So it's like building mental muscle. I like that.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put this hero into action? Especially in a high-pressure environment like academia, how can our listeners start building their own inner hero?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Pretorius points to several concrete strategies. One that she emphasizes is collaboration, particularly through things like writing groups where students can support each other, share their struggles openly, and celebrate their successes together.
It's like creating that sense of community we were talking about earlier, right? Knowing you're not alone in those struggles.
Precisely. Feeling isolated just exacerbates those feelings of anxiety and stress. Another crucial element is mentorship, having someone who truly understands the pressures of academia, who can normalize those struggles and offer guidance based on their own experiences.
It's about fostering a culture where it's okay to say, hey, this is really hard right now, without feeling like you're failing or falling behind.
I think that's so important. And on the flip side, it's just as important to celebrate those successes along the way, no matter how small they may seem. Finishing a challenging chapter, receiving positive feedback on a paper, presenting your research at a conference, these are all wins worth acknowledging and celebrating.
Absolutely, because those small wins build momentum and remind us why we started this journey in the first place.
Yeah.
And this takes us to what I found to be a really powerful part of Pretorius's work, her call to action, which feels incredibly relevant to our deep dives today.
It does, doesn't it? She speaks directly to the reader, acknowledging that they might be in academia themselves or know someone who is. And she urges them to engage in open and honest conversations about mental health to help break down that stigma we discussed earlier.
Because let's be real, pretending it doesn't exist only makes the problem worse. What stood out to me was how she emphasized that it's not about having all the answers, but about simply creating the space for these conversations to happen. It'd be easy to end this conversation feeling overwhelmed, but I appreciate that Pretorius doesn't leave us with a bleak outlook. She ends on such a hopeful note, and it really resonated with me.
Yeah, it's that sense of hope that really sticks with you. This idea that positive change is possible when we start prioritizing well-being alongside academic achievement. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. In fact, they should complement each other.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that a healthy academic environment is one where people feel supported, not just intellectually, but emotionally as well. A place where they can truly thrive on all levels.
Absolutely. And ultimately, that benefits everyone. It leads to more groundbreaking research, more engaging teaching, and a more vibrant and impactful academic community overall.
We've covered so much ground today. Before we wrap up, was there anything else from Pretorius's work or M's journey that particularly struck you?
There was one thing that really stood out to me. M talked about how through this process of prioritizing her well-being, she actually rediscovered that initial spark, that sense of curiosity and joy in her research.
Hmm.
It's a powerful reminder that at the heart of academia should be this genuine love of learning, this drive to explore and understand the world around us. And sometimes, amidst all the deadlines, the pressure to publish, and the competition, we lose sight of that.
It's about getting back to that why, remembering that passion that fueled this journey in the first place.
Precisely. So if anything from today's deep dive resonated with you, whether you're knee-deep in academia or just fascinated by its inner workings, take a moment to reconnect with that sense of curiosity, that inherent desire to learn and grow.
And that is how we make a deep dive count.
Yeah.
Remember, knowledge is power, but self-care is the fuel that keeps that engine running.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, if anything we've talked about today resonated with you personally, please don't hesitate to reach out for support. You're not alone. There are resources available, people who understand, and a whole community out there ready to listen.